Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Jessica, and today we're going to be doing our monthly show and tell for the month of June. So June's over now, we're into July, and I'm ready to show you all of the projects that I finished in June. So let's get started. So in the beginning of June, I needed a few quick projects as gifts, and I made 2 Minky-backed whole cloth quilts, and I made 2 baby quilts. So I knew I had to gift those in the beginning of the month, so I did separate little video recordings of those to show you them before I gifted them. So let's take a look at those now. I'm making this little snippet of the June show and tell early because I just made these whole cloth quilts yesterday and today, and I want to show you them before I give them away. So this is a whole cloth quilt that I quilted on the back with Luxe Cuddle Minky. I did a tutorial on this. It's on the channel, so I'll link to that below. But I made 2 of these as gifts, and then I just tied them up with a little extra cut of binding, and I flipped it back so that you could see and feel this Minky here. They're throw size. Really comfortable, really fun, beautiful project. This is the other one. This one has an apples on the front. The back is this red Minky. So really great project. Like I said, there's a tutorial, so you can make these if you want to make them. But in the beginning of this month, I made these 2, and then I knew that I'd be giving them away before the show and tell, so I just wanted to record a little clip it for you so I could put it in the show and tell. Here is the first baby quilt. Now this quilt, I used the fabric collection called ABC XYZ. It came out last year, so it might be a little bit tricky to find now, but I've had some of it saved. I used 2 charm packs to make this, so it's a 9x9 layout, and it measures about 41 inches. What's nice about that is that for the backing, you only need 1 width of fabric. So it's small, it's a great size for a baby, and it's really nice because you don't have to piece a backing. So let me just give you an up close. These prints are really cute. They're animals with letters on them. And then there's also like a letter print, a puzzle, an abacus, blocks. Really just cute. This one's like all different shapes tossed around. There's a couple of versions of that. And then the backing is this large, it's going to be this one here. It's this large scale animal with all the letters. So let me flip it over and I'll show you that. And here is the backing of this. I love this print. I used it to back another quilt, and I had some extra, and I still have a little bit left, maybe to make another baby quilt or 2. This was a really fast, really fun project. If I need to make a last minute baby gift or just something that I need to get done really quick, this is a great one because it's super duper easy, it's beautiful, and it's fun to piece too. I feel like whenever I try to do these videos, it's like the windiest day ever, but so be it. We have to work with the wind today. This is the next baby quilt that I made. It's the same layout as the first one, 9 charm pack squares by 9 charm pack squares, so it measures about 41 inches finished. This is another old collection, really old. This is probably 5 or 6 years old. This is called, I think it was called Mighty Machines. So I had a layer cake of that left over, so I cut it up to use half of it for this quilt. And I used the pantograph called Stacked Snails. I like this one. It's these little like rounded kind of like resembles a Baptist fan, but really loosely. And I like it. They just kind of meander across, really pretty. For the backing, I used a Minnick & Simpson woven that I had. This is from one of their woven collections. I can't remember which one it was, but I have a few yards of this, and I used it. And then I used this Ruby Star Society blue. It was the closest match that I had for binding, and I think it looks really nice. So this is the second baby quilt. Now the next quilt I finished after that is one that I shared on Instagram, so you may have seen it if you follow me there. This quilt is using Christmas fabric. It's called Christmas with Scaredy Cat, and it's by Jedi Craft Girl, and this is a Riley Blake collection. So the quilt pattern that I used, the pattern called Starbreak. And what that quilt did was across the middle of these patchwork squares, it had a line of stars. Now what I did though was, instead of having all stars, because this was a Christmas quilt, I thought it would be fun to have trees. So I designed a tree block to fit in this space, and then I did all trees across it and then 1 star far as was called for in the regular pattern. I really enjoyed making this. It's a really quick quilt. It's beautiful and it's fun. I did have one problem with this quilt. When I was quilting it, it was completely user error, but on my long arm, one of the channel locks, so it has a vertical channel lock and a horizontal channel lock, one of the channel locks came unhooked as I was having this pantograph stitched out by the Qmatic software. And what happened was, I wasn't in the room, I was doing something else, and what happened then was my machine was not able to stitch vertically. So what happened is I have a super thick horizontal line on the quilt, and because what happened was, it's not just one pass, it's multiple passes across here, because the machine thought that everything was working just fine, even though that channel lock came undone, and it kept stitching it. So it's back and forth on this whole one horizontal line, and I cannot unpick it. Now, I did try to unpick it, and what happens is, I do believe that with time, this is where I tried to unpick it. Now on the front, it doesn't look too bad, but with time, this is gonna just wear away this fabric here. So I stopped unpicking it, and I just left it as it was. Now it is slightly annoying to have this line across this quilt that I spent time making, but mistakes happen. So that's this quilt. Let's take a look at the full thing. Here is the Star Break quilt with the Christmas trees across. Now, in the original pattern, like I mentioned, it has stars all the way across the middle, but I designed that tree to fit in there, and I think it looks really nice. These fabrics are really pretty, bright, and Christmassy. Again, this one's called Christmas with Scaredy Cat. It has some really great whites in this collection, so I really love the kind of like hand-drawn asterisk star one that is the background for my trees. And a really great stripes too for the binding. So this is a multicolor stripe on my binding, but there's also the red, and then there's a red and a pink. You can see that line where I made the mistake, but once this gets washed and used, I don't think it'll stand out too much. Now the next quilt I made was another Christmas quilt. If you are a quilter, you know that this time of the year is the time, May, June, July, when all of the holiday collections come out. They usually start coming out in May. So you have plenty of time to make your quilts for the holidays. So this is another holiday quilt. I loved making this. This is a snow globe quilt. The pattern is called Winter Wonderland, and it's by Tasha Noel. So what I did here was, the pattern uses house blocks like this one, and then you frame them into a snow globe. It also has Christmas tree blocks that get framed into a snow globe. So let me show you one of those. Here's one of those. And then it also has a few snow globes where it's just the fabric. So this collection worked really nicely because it had a really pretty blueprint that would work well as a snow globe. It's Santa with his reindeer flying around. So the collection I used here is Twas. It's a Riley Blake collection. I'll put all the information in the description, like I will with all of these quilts. I'll let you know what pattern I used, what fabric collection, what pantograph, because I can't always remember the names, but I'll put it there for you. But let's take a look at the whole quilt. Here's the full snow globes quilt. These houses were really fun to make, and they have so much great fussy cutting potential, so you could really spend the time cutting out what you want to be in the doorways, and also on the trees too. You could even, if you were working from scraps or really cute fabric, you could even fussy cut for the chains. I did finish binding all 3 quilts that I mentioned in the May video, so I'm counting those as finishes. Even though these quilts have been done for a while and they were just waiting for binding, it counts. So first one up is my Socialites. This, I just did a very simple layout, white in the middle, framed with the blocks with a dark blue, and I used an old Bonnie and Camille fabric backing that I had. This is lawn, so it's extremely soft. This quilt is really lightweight and beautiful. The front here, the blocks are made with regular quilting cotton, but the front here, this blue and this white are wovens. So with the wovens in combination with the lawn backing, this quilt is really light, quite a bit lighter than a regular cotton quilt. So it's a nice summer quilt. I was happy to get this binding finished. I did decide to stitch down by hand, so it's a really nice way to finish this. I quilted this on my Bernina long arm with the pantograph called Stacked Snails. So let's take a look at this whole quilt. So if you didn't hear of Socialites before, these blocks were all free on the Fat Quarter Shop blog. They had a bunch of different designers come together and each give the pattern for one block. They had a different setting layout. I chose this layout, just a very simple layout on my own. I did contribute to the pattern. This block right here is mine. Ohio Twist is what they called it. But these blocks were all really fun to make, and they had a variety of sizes available. They had the patterns available in 3 inches, 6 inches, and 9 inches. I did the 9-inch squares here. If you missed it, you could join in and make these anytime. These patterns are still free on their blog. The next quilt that I finished up is the Nona quilt, and this was the 2-color one, the 2-color version that I made during the quilt along. I love how this 2-color version looks in this pattern. I just think it's fantastic. If you haven't heard of the Nona quilt along, it was a quilt pattern that I designed. It's on the Bernina blog, weallsew.com. It's free, and I break the quilt down into steps, 9 different steps, 9 different weeks that correspond to the quilt along, and each week I covered the topic that we were doing in depth in a blog post on their website and also a video on this YouTube channel. So there's a playlist called the Nona Quilt Along that has all of the information on this. So if you haven't seen that before, you can check that out because it's really fun. It's a great first time quilt if you've never made a quilt before. And if you have made a quilt before, it's a fun one to just zip right through. So let's look at this whole quilt. Here's a 2-color Nona quilt. So I really like how the chains look in the 2 colors, and you could even change this in the middle to be a plus. That would be a really fun way to change the pattern up. On the back here, I did this gray, and I think it's a nice accent because the stars in the background there are the exact same color gray, so I thought that looked pretty. The final quilt that I finished was my birthday quilt. So I'm so happy to have this done. One of my kids actually has a birthday in July, so I finished it with plenty of time. I just need to wash it and get it ready to put on her bed. I did scalloped binding here. There is a video here on my channel that shows you how I scalloped the edges, and there is a second video that shows you how to bind the scalloped edges. So you can refer to those videos if you're interested. I also will link to this cake pattern. I get a lot of questions. The cake pattern is a free pattern that's by Lori Holt. It was on the Fat Quarter Shop blog. And the setting is my own. So I'll write up a setting pattern so you guys have it in case you're interested in making this exact same quilt. But I'm so happy to have it done. And a lot of you commented last time how you love this backing fabric when I showed it. This was an older line by Michael Miller. The collection was called Happy Birthday, and this specific print, I think it was called Kids Party, perhaps. It's a little bit tricky to find. I did find it on Etsy. There might not be more of it now at this point, but I love the touch that this adds to the back of the quilt. So let's go look at that one. And here's the birthday quilt. So you've seen this before, but what I just did this month was finish the binding. And again, there is a video on how to do the scallop binding. The backing's really fun and kind of just complements this whole top. So what am I hoping to accomplish in July? I have a bunch of quilts that I'm working on. I have some that just need binding. This one I finished and I shared with you all. This is called White Tidings. It has a sister pattern that's in red that I already finished a while ago. And these are available in my shop. So this one needs binding. I shared it without binding. So this one I'm hoping to bind. I pulled out a few of you know, my unfinished projects. So I'm hoping to get them quilted. This one here that I have with me that I hope to have up next is a sunflower quilt. This pattern is by Lella Boutique, and I made this is just half of it, it's folded in half. I made this a while ago, and at the time I didn't have my long arm yet, and I was waiting because I thought I was gonna get one. So this has just been waiting to be quilted. So I'm hoping to get this quilted in July and share it with you at the end of the month or the beginning of August. I'm still plugging away on my summer stars quilt. I have the big stars almost all the way finished. So my next step is to work on the sashing pieces and then assemble it. So that one I'm hoping to finish this month. I also have a few other projects I'm working on. So this is your first glimpse at this one. I shared the star on Instagram, but I didn't share the rest yet. This is a collection called Santa Fe. It's a Riley Blake collection that will be coming out soon. And I believe it actually comes out in July, and I loved it. So I'm doing these star blocks, and I'm working with a log cabin. So it's going to be this big star log cabin quilt, and I'm really excited. So this one I will definitely have finished in July. I also have some other projects that I'm just starting that the fabric is still stacked. It's in the beginning stages. I didn't even start cutting it yet. So I'll be working on some of those in July. One more thing to note, in July, we're starting a quilt along. So I have shared the other day on here on YouTube, and I've been sharing it on Instagram. This is my Stargazer quilt, and we're going to be working through this quilt together. It's a 6-week quilt along. We'll work through every single step of it together. I will link to the pattern below. Let me show you what the full quilt looks like now. So I'm really excited to make that quilt. I hope you guys are too. So far, there's been a bunch of excitement. I'm so happy that so many of you will be joining me in making this. And that about wraps it up for July. So thank you so much for being here and following along. I appreciate it, and I will be seeing you soon.